So in this video, I'm going to break down Emmanuel Navarrete's TKO win over Eduardo Nunez. And I think the big thing we're going to look at is just how friggin' special is Emmanuel Navarrete at this point, because it's easy to point out the obvious. The obvious is he's flawed. A lot of things he does are not traditional. They're not what works typically, yet he hits extremely hard. And when you do unorthodox things and you master a certain style and you hit extremely hard, that can be a superpower in and of itself. And though we've seen certain styles give him problems, Ruben Villa in the back half of their fight, Hobson Kosakow gave him some issues. Baranchek gave him issues with elusiveness. It's been the guys that have the fast feet that kind of trouble him at times, and the guys that don't engage him. In this fight, Eduardo Nunez came out looking to box, but he really didn't have that elite level foot speed to keep Navarrete away from him. He didn't really have an active jab. He didn't have the tools. He came out with a mindset knowing Navarrete at times struggles with that, but he didn't know how to implement things, or he didn't have the physical capabilities to implement them. And what I saw in this fight is, I think people are assuming, and I'm not really sure, I think it's probably because Navarrete fought once, his last fight, he was doing all right, and then he gets cut. The cut is ruled a head clash, and then the fight ends up being a no contest because he was originally awarded victory, and then it was seen that the damage was done by a blow, so it really should have been ruled from it should have been a TKO loss. So I think a lot of people go, okay, he's been up and down his career. He lost to Baranchek, I believe, in 2024. Now he's having this weird fight. He's going in against this up-and-coming Mexican fighter, big puncher. And then what we see from Navarrete is time and time again, he's supposed to have a Mexican classic, and he separates. This was thought to be kind of like an all-time great. This could be a special fight. And instead, it was kind of a levels fight. And there's a level of that, not to keep saying level, but that's kind of the theme of this card, was a levels fight to a certain extent. And in the main event, Navarrete is a certain tier of fighter, and maybe Eduardo Nunez gets to that point, but it just felt like he had different gears and different things he was capable of doing. And then quite simply, when you fight Navarrete, we have yet to see the person where his power doesn't impact them. And if his power impacts the other fighter, it just seems like it's a very tall ask to see them win the fight, because it's just a lot. You have to overcome a lot of things for things to go right for you. Where does Navarrete fit in with the best Mexican fighters? Well, I don't think he's the best Mexican fighter, and he's probably not in the top 5 Mexican fighters. But I think the interesting argument is, he won his title in 2018. I remember I went to a fundraiser when he won the belt. It was December 2018, I want to say, and he won the belt over Isaac Dogbo, and then he wins in the rematch, and he just becomes this interesting player in the division. We're not quite at a decade just yet, but he's getting close to being a decade-long champion. And I can't think of many Mexican fighters in recent memory that have held a title for a decade, and that's pretty special. Yes, there's been times where he doesn't have the belt, but I would dare say, and this could come off stupid, that he didn't go a full calendar year without having a title at any point. Even when he loses or gives it up, he has a belt at some capacity in those years. He's something special, and I think that he shows that physicality is an elite trait in boxing, right? So Navarrete is someone that probably gets underrated by historians and maybe purists, because there's just a level of physicality and toughness to his style, and it's not as much about precision and nuance. It's just, I'm a strong physical guy, and I have these tactics that work for me, and I hit extremely hard, and my power changes fights. One last thing I wanted to say about the Navarrete versus Nunez fight: it is really refreshing to see two guys lay it on the line and then be so classy at the end, where they're hanging out with each other. They're good sports. Maybe I'm just getting old, but I just love seeing that, where it's two guys that respect each other. They laid it all on the line, and then they're just two kind of humble, good guys. Maybe I'm a sucker for that, but it really felt like that was a special moment. that having a fight of that magnitude really meant something, and they both had each other's respect, which I think really was impactful. Co-feature, we saw Emiliano Vargas take the biggest step up of his career, took on Augustin Quintana. Quintana's best known for winning a very close fight over Mark Castro. Vargas gets a stoppage. I did not like the stoppage. Quintana could have continued. The fight was shifting in Vargas's favor. This is a really good step-up fight for Vargas. I think that for me, sometimes I forget he's only 21 years old. He looks solid, but he also is at that point where his record is firmly established, and he needs to take this next level of competition. And I think that that's something that's a delicate art. He called for former world champions after winning. We'll see what he gets. But there's a level of marketing and social media bravado that comes with him where he has a fan base and people want to see him and he wants interesting fights. And yet, if you're being fully honest, he doesn't quite look like those guys that are in the title fights, the Richardson Hitchens, the Teofimo Lopez, or the Shakur Stevensons just yet. So it's a balancing act of what we're seeing. This was a fight where he lost a couple of rounds. We haven't seen that yet from him as a pro. He had to do some thinking, and he overcame the adversities in this fight. The next thing I want to see from Emiliano Vargas is someone who can match his physical skills. You know, the athleticism around his age, and how does he do with someone who comes to win, who's around his age, who has the same dreams and desires of being a superstar. I think that that would be a good next test at a certain point. In my opinion, once you get to 20-0, if you are that lucky, that's when you just have to kind of be ready to take whatever fights in front of you. He's a little younger, so it might be to 24 or 25, superstar treatment, etc. But he's getting to that point where I think we can start to realistically wonder, what fights can you throw him in with? It was a good next step, but the stoppage kind of left a sour taste in this, the outcome. Another feel-good story on the undercard. We had Abel Ramos. Uncle Abel Ramos beats Tahmir Smalls. Interesting fight if we're breaking it down. Tahmir Smalls, to me, is kind of still an 8-round fighter who's fighting in 10-round fights, and this epitomized why I think he's still kind of an 8-round fighter, and I will break it down. He won the first 4 rounds of this fight. He has some great traits, like a jab. When the fight goes beyond the 5th or 6th round in his last 2 fights, the fight has gotten a little out of control for him. I'm not sure what it is, whether it's the way he paces himself in the ring or what it is, but that second half of the fight, he has to figure out something to be able to change the tide. Against Abel Ramos, Abel was consistently applying pressure to him. And when Tahmir, or I'll say Smalls, because that's like a more AP style of doing it, when Smalls was looking for his spots to take breaks, Abel was then amping up pressure, it looked to my perception, and really just forced him into a veteran fight, a fight in which he ended up losing because he's in there with a guy who had just come off a draw with Mario Barrios, a very seasoned, tricky guy, a guy who had only really been stopped by a good puncher in a 50-50 fight. And he's been a really tough veteran who's had some tough breaks and really hasn't kind of just taken a more professional boxing, a more sport approach. And this was Small's first big test after, I believe it was Jose Roman, who had the close fight with Jaleel Hackett, and that some people thought that was a close fight. So for me, Smalls, it's not a huge setback in the sense it's a setback that he's not undefeated, but I mean he's at that point where I think some 8-round fights would really help him, and then he could develop and kind of work on strategies to go to that second half of the fight. And for Abel Ramos, interesting contender. We look at that welterweight division, and there's like people talk about the lack of depth. When you have a good veteran beating an up-and-comer, that gives some life to a division because now he's the type of guy that could enter into a title eliminator and become a player where you start to wonder. I think of him as like a more veteran version of Bilal Fawaz. Fawaz just emerged later in his career and really has established himself as a guy in the division, at least to me, by getting an upset over Junaid Boston and then a big win. Maybe I overrate Ishmael Davis, but I think that's a pretty big win too in consecutive fights, not too far apart from each other. Card opener, we had Jordan Martinez and Arturo Cardenas fight to a draw. that also was interesting, but interesting in a different way. Jordan Martinez, relatively unproven, showed that he's ready for these stages. And then Arturo Cardenas has been taking a very hard road since being on these stages with Matchroom. And you start to wonder if his hard road is to get to a title, or if his hard road is a prove it thing. You got to prove it time and time again to show that you've really got this, like that you're at a lower weight class, 122 pounds, and there's some really big names there, and then there's kind of a gap. And to show that you're ready for an Inoue or a Junto Nakatani, which I feel like are the class of the division. And in this fight, Martinez kind of outworked him. Cardenas, very patient, worked his way back in the fight. The fight was a draw. I texted with Dakota. He had Martinez winning. I didn't fully score this one. I felt like the emotion of the crowd went to Martinez. He became a beloved figure overnight because of his performance. But I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that if you really sat down objectively and you scored it, that Cardenas could have had a draw. What it sets the stage for, though, is a really interesting rematch between two fighters that might not have had a ton of momentum coming into this fight, per se, on a big stage. Now they could enter into maybe even a co-feature spot because of having a draw, maybe some animosity, and maybe that builds to a bigger fight. So maybe if they come back to this area, Arizona, at some point in the year, that's a fight that could happen. So those are my thoughts on the card. Let me know in the comments if you like it. And as always, subscribe to try to help me grow the channel.